All right, how's it going, everyone? Um, so I'm trying to relaunch my channel here, and I've been trying to just go live, and it's not working out because I need to, I guess, figure out different solutions for live streaming to multiple platforms. So at the moment, I'm going to start recording normal videos again and just posting them to YouTube and Rumble. And today, I guess I just wanted to do sort of a off the top video where I check in about sobriety in general, along the lines of a lot of the videos I've done in the past, like sobriety check in video. Um, but also talk about homelessness and drug addiction and mental health in California, where I live. Um, so I guess I'll just get right into it. So I guess I'm 5 years sober now. My sobriety date is June 28th. So just a month and a half ago or so, 2 months ago was my 5 years. And for me, it's been a it's been kind of a crazy ride. I I started using when I was 13, and I abused drugs and alcohol, mostly weed, alcohol, and pills when I was 13. But I mean, I tried smoking speed too, and when I was like 17, 16, and 17, tried smoking heroin. I never shot anything up, but the point is, I kind of got off the rails early and stayed off the rails for a long time. And the only reason that things never got worse in my life, I think, is because I was always super careful about trying to maintain this whole lie so my parents would never catch me. And so when I had friends that would, sneak out for a week at a time and go steal cars and stay up the whole time on speed and shit like that, like, I might like smoke with them and then go home and just like lay in my bed and stare at the ceiling all night. So I don't know. I guess in that regard, I was kind of a cuck to my parents. I never wanted to disappoint them too bad. Um, but that was a good thing because it saved me from going way deeper into chaos and destruction, and I already went pretty deep as it was. So thank God. But yeah, it. I guess it was me realizing that I was 24 years old and I wasn't turning into the person that I thought I would be as an adult. Like I wasn't able to get the girls that I liked to date me. I wasn't successful at any of the hobbies or skills that I was pursuing, at least not successful enough in my eyes. It's funny when I look back, it's like if I wouldn't have been so hard on myself when I was like 20, I probably could have gotten somewhere a lot farther than I did, at least for sure, even with the drugs by the time I was 30. But I was just too bent out of shape. I was confused about my sexuality. I hated myself. I was confused about God and Christianity, which I'd been raised in the church. So even when I thought I was just leaving it behind me, um, I didn't really understand how programmed I was and what a large chasm that left in my, not just like my being, because that's like a very cliche thing to say. Like it's not really that. It's more of like, although I guess that, but it's like your perception of the world has a hole in it all of a sudden. And it's not necessarily easy to fix that or make it go away. And I mean, because you can't like, it's like once Pandora's box has been opened, right? It can't be shut again. And so once you're out of the land of like unthinking, just accepting what you've been told is the correct belief, and you're now thinking for yourself, if you haven't had any new data, to reassess the old beliefs or had any new data to build a new belief, then you're just stuck. And so I was kind of it was kind of nice actually because I wasn't overthinking anything at the time. At that time, I was kind of just living. Um, but it was inevitable that with all my emotional and like self perceptive, like all my issues that I had perceiving myself in the world and understanding myself, it made it really hard to, I guess, be that way, indefinitely. It made it hard for me to just not have, I guess what the problem was is that I thought I didn't have beliefs, but I was really, I was building them the whole time unconsciously again. But now it was like, because I had rejected Christianity, I'd gotten into all this weird, like, counterculture style, psychedelia type information on the new age. And it was a long process, starting at like Alex Gray's artwork and electronic music and ending in some kind of weird amalgamation of spiritual beliefs that I thought created a new person. And that was when I was like, I was probably like 25 or 26 or 27 or something. And I realized like I didn't understand Christianity or my own religion, and I had tried to reject it out of hatred and resentment, uh, and replace it with a bunch of other people's cultures and religions that on the face of it seemed to make more sense to me. Like they were more natural. They hadn't been as corrupted by institutions, or so I thought. And it just made so much more sense. Like, oh, it's coming out of the jungle, bro. It's fucking way sicker. I don't know. It was really that superficial. And so once I realized that was what was going on, like a big part of it was trying to have debates with people. And I realized I was like, I can't really have intellectual debates. Like I might not be dumb, but I'm stuck in this world of like, I think and I feel, and I don't really know anything. And that was when I was like, okay, well, I I have this like worldview that is super far out here in outer space, and I'm not even sure how much of it can rest on solid ground. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I realized I didn't know what I thought or what I felt or believed, and that in large part I was just saying what I thought matched certain images that I wanted to embody. And so I stepped back from that and started questioning things, and this was really the beginning of me getting sober. Is there was that process of realizing that I didn't have access to the women that I wasn't, or that I wanted to have access to, and that I wasn't turning into the person that I believed I was supposed to turn into as an adult, and that there was this big disconnect, I guess, from the way I was living and who I wanted to be, or the way I was living and who I was versus the way I wanted to be living and who I wanted to be. And so when I was asking those questions, I started deconstructing this reality that I had built or whatever. And, that's how I started realizing that it was all these fragments of other people's cultures and religions that I had rejected mine based on resentment, and that none of the ideas in my head were really, I didn't really know anything. I was just projecting. And it was all based on this like emotional journey I had been on essentially since I was a kid. And so I ended up going back when I was like 30. Well, there was one other thing that played into this, and that's that uh, I don't remember exactly how the years line up here, and I'm not going to do the math while I'm sitting here on camera, but it was uh, it was around 2016 that let's see, that would have been 8 years ago, so I would have been 26. All right, so it was or no, 27, I think, whatever. Anyways, yeah, 27. Anyways, so I had been a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I had just gotten super high one day on weed, and I was thinking just to myself about all these different ways in which if I were a leader, I would like use the power of government to essentially manipulate people into living the way that I wanted them to live. And I was thinking like, oh, how can we get people to eat healthy? How can we get them to sleep? I'm still super into biohacking. A big part of it is because I'm like, okay, if I fuck myself off for so long, is it even possible to like heal yourself on a physiological level and and completely? And so all these different aspects come into play. But so I was super into like biohacking and eating healthy and stuff, and I really believed that like the big problem that we had in the world wasn't, or in the US wasn't medical care per se, but more lifestyle. And that if you could use things like tax incentives and all kinds of other, just essentially penalties and incentives to get people to buy health food and eat health food and exercise and do all these other things, that it would be so great. And as I'm coming up with all these ideas, it just occurred to me like, well, what if someone doesn't want to live that way? And now they are being put at a huge disadvantage, and the food that they want to buy is astronomically expensive, and the places that they want to live, they can't afford to live, and any number of things. And so I realized like, well, you're using authoritarianism to force those people into living a certain kind of way, and that's like the exact opposite of what you believe in. And it doesn't matter like if the way that you're forcing them to live is ostensibly good, it still is authoritarian, like tyranny. And it was at that moment that I realized like socialism will never work because of that. Like you have to use authoritarianism to enforce every aspect of your planned economy. And I, at that moment, I was like, okay, I can't be a Bernie supporter. But I wasn't like, I wasn't conservative by any stretch of the imagination. I ended up voting either Libertarian or Green Party that year. And but I felt like Bernie Sanders had the nomination stolen from him, and so it was the beginning of me thinking like, yo, I thought the Republicans were the corrupt ones, and here they let Trump get the nomination. Meanwhile, the DNC straight up jacked Bernie. And so I was like, well, I don't know about this anymore. And it was at the same time where, because I had that realization about the government, and I was like, well, and the other part of that realization was I was like currently thinking to myself like, oh, well, if only the government would give me a place to live and pay for my school and all this other stuff, then I'd be able to be happy. Like I would just stop doing drugs, and I wouldn't be bent out of shape anymore, and I'll study and focus on art and fitness and like eating healthy, and everything will just be better because I've been given a place to live and a future by the government. And I realized, I was like, well, what exactly are they even going to be able to give you that's going to achieve that? Like, how long are they going to give it to you for? Like, what are the specifics of this idea that you have in your head? And the more I was thinking about it, the question kept coming up like, well, how long are you going to wait for this? And I was like, yeah, this is literally never going to happen. Like these standards that I'm coming up with, like the government could never deliver this. And I just realized like, to live at the standard that most of us want to live at, you have to work yourself. You have to do it yourself. No one else can build that for you. Either you do it yourself or you don't get it. You get some vastly reduced version of it that, was delivered based on the goodwill and charity of others. And I mean, to expect the goodwill and charity of others to equal the results of someone who's been driven and working 16-hour days for years is just, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, I realized individual responsibility was the only way to fix myself, and so I started saying that online, that individual responsibility, taking responsibility for my life, that I thought that was the way that we could fix a lot of our problems, homelessness, drug addiction, mental health, and I do believe mental health too, because I think a lot of mental health is getting caught in a positive feedback loop of language in your own head when you refuse to take responsibility for your life, and then you're blaming someone else, and then you have something bad happens, and then you have emotions, and then I don't know, you get caught in this circle where it never occurs to you that the problem is you, and you literally go insane because of it. Like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like over time you keep using drugs to self-medicate, you keep telling yourself fucking lies, and then after like a decade of getting older and telling yourself bullshit and consuming drugs, all of a sudden you're just crazy. Like, it's you might not even actually be crazy, like, you just look crazy. It's like a drug induced psychosis or something, but it's like, or maybe you are actually crazy. That's the thing, is they don't even really know what it is to be crazy. I submit to you all right now that being crazy has to do mostly with your internal narrative, and that people who are crazy have a problem processing language, and they don't understand language right, and therefore the rest of the way they perceive the world is wrong. But that's a whole different story. But it does sort of get into what I believe here about drug addiction in general, which is that you are the one who are making yourself crazy, and you are the one who has to take responsibility for the thoughts in your head and for the reality of life that you face. And if you don't do that, then you're going to just keep driving yourself crazy. And so that was kind of a tangent, but in any case, I was telling people that I did believe that personal responsibility was the answer, and they started telling me that of course I would come up with that solution because I'm a privileged white male. And so I stopped really paying attention to liberals altogether at that point, because I had spent so long, like literally over a decade, being so bent out of shape and feeling so much pain. And for the first time in my life, I felt so confident about one of my own thoughts. Like, I literally couldn't even think for myself because I was so insecure. I needed to be validated. I needed my thought to be validated by someone who I believed had the right information before I could integrate that into my thinking. And so I really couldn't even think for myself. And for the first time ever, I was so sure. Like, it actually made sense in my own head, and I got there on my own, and I believed, like, this is real. And so there was really nothing anyone could say to me at that point, because it felt so good to be able to think for myself for once, that I was like, well, I'm not gonna go back and say this just because that's what you want me to hear. I was like, I've been doing that my whole life, and I'm not doing that anymore. And so I thought at the time that I was going to be this like ultra libertarian that learned both the conservative arguments, and I thought I already knew all the liberal arguments, which clearly I didn't. Never even heard of white privilege. What a dork. But I started trying to learn all the conservative arguments because I thought I was going to reverse engineer them, and I was going to beat everyone. Like, I was going to be better at debating than liberals and conservatives. And what happened is I realized, first of all, that I didn't know what confirmation bias was, and that I had just been, when I would read an article, it would all just go in one ear and out the other, and then I would see one keyword, and I would latch onto that keyword because to me, I could make an entire argument that proved my point based on that keyword. And it didn't matter like if I didn't really understand the argument the other person was making, because all I was paying attention to was one idea and then my whole response. Um, it's like maybe they did mention something along those lines, but because you didn't pay attention to the rest of the boring explanation context stuff on either end, you have no idea why they brought that up. And so when you're letting stuff, and it would be the same when I was listening to something, it's like when you're all the boring, when people start explaining stuff, I mean, it's like you just turn off, that's not interesting anymore. Like, but then when they say something that you either disagree with or that you want to hear, automatically you snap too. And so I realized that I had done all this research, and every time I heard anyone say something I disagreed with, I either automatically used that to rationalize my entire argument somehow, or I just like completely ignored it and said that that it was based in false claims, like this is a conservative conspiracy or some shit. It was just so easy to just not listen. And so once I started, I realized that I would be listening to, like, for example, the first one that really cracked me open was Dave Rubin's first interview of Larry Elder. And I remember listening to that. I turned it off so many times, and I was screaming, and I remember like, how could a black man say this? Like, and he was literally just talking about like crime statistics and stuff. And I remember I had to like return it on. I had to like tell myself, like, this is the point of what you're doing. You're supposed to be listening to this so that way you can hear his argument. And and it took me so long. But eventually by the time it was all said and done, I was like, holy shit, this dude is fucking just destroyed every argument that I thought I knew. Like, and it was all so simple. It was really all so simple. I take it back. It's a little more complex than that when you really want to get into like the failure to integrate. But you have to talk a lot about what Democrats did, not Republicans. Republicans, were on the cutting edge of getting black people into colleges, getting black people into government. It's the Democrats that were creating laws that were holding black people back. And the parties never switched. The parties never switched. The Democrats are still the party of race manipulation and population manipulation for power. The Republicans are still the ones who are for individual sovereignty. And there's a lot of Republicans who are globalists now who I would say are closer to Democrats than they are Republicans. But the fact of the matter is that the principles that conservatives ostensibly are trying to conserve are classical liberalism. And, those are the things that ultimately that I learned about that helped undergird my whole journey. Like this idea of individual responsibility. It's that you are the one that is responsible for caring for yourself and for your family and for your community, and being able to offer something of value in that regard. That there's no one else that can do that. There's no one else that can come in and be the dad in your family, or that can be, the all-time quarterback in the cul-de-sac, or, sure, there's other people out there, but if they're not doing it, who's to say that they have those skills? If you're the one that has the skill and the wherewithal and you're right there, why aren't you doing it? And so there's all these aspects of, it's funny, of living in the types of communities that people envision, where there's no homelessness and everyone's happy and has a hobby, and everyone's doing things with their time and has a place to be. That doesn't come from politicians creating the perfect system. That comes from human beings who have moral principles that make it imperative that they live a certain way. And so when I look at my recovery story, that that's where I got led in this whole journey, is that I didn't have first principles, and the only thing I cared about was instant gratification, and I just wanted to be high or playing video games or having sex, and I just wanted money to be there, and I didn't want to have to think or do anything in particular. I wanted to be able to just cruise and do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, and not really have to answer to anyone. And the thing that's funny about that is you need resources to do the things that you want to do. And when you're not willing, if you're not naturally gifted or blessed enough to just have those laying around, then you have to go out and get them. And when you're not willing to do that, you wind up resentful and angry, and you turn into a problem. Like you you are taking stuff from other people. You are causing other people to need to spend their time on you and their resources on you, and you're a drain instead of a surplus. And so it there how much room do you have in a society for people like that before the whole thing gets flipped on its head? And it's like maybe a few percent, like, because the problem is that once too many people start doing it, then you have all these other people in society that are saying, why am I working then? Like, if this person's getting taken care of and they're not doing shit, then why should I be busting my ass for all this? And I would much rather have a meager existence than, have to be worried about my debt. And so people just check out. And I don't know. I mean, there's so many aspects of it. It's like people always blame capitalism, right? And it's the thing is that capitalism is just an idea about private property, ownership of private property. It's really, capitalism is not an economic system. Free markets are an economic system, and capitalism is a theory that goes in a free market system. Capitalism is just a theory that says in a free market economy, individuals should have the right to own their own property, or it's really an imperative that they have the right to own their own property, because at the base of property is the value of your labor. Like if you don't have any possessions, the only thing that you own is the value of your labor, or the potential value of your labor. And so if you cannot have private property, then you can't own the value of your labor. And so at the very bottom of all of this bullshit argument against capitalism is the reality that individual sovereignty and the right to own private property is what makes us free individuals, not slaves. And so the further we get away from that with ridiculous tax systems and just overregulation that makes it impossible to do business, makes it harder, property taxes, wealth tax, all these things that make it harder and harder to actually own and maintain your own property, that devalues your property, inflation, all of this, it makes it to where you don't own the value of your own labor. The value of your labor is taken from you through all these different means. And so you're losing your sovereignty. And that's what I realized was happening to me with drugs. It's like you don't have sovereignty when you have to spend your money to get high, and you have to be high all day. And it's like, oh, you want to meet a nice girl, but you also want to be high. And now you're so high that you can't really show up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and fucking, you might be able to get a girl if you're trying to be like a character, and the girl that you're trying to get with wants to do drugs and date a character. But a serious woman that is taking care of business and trying to start a family and things like that, you're not going to find that type of a woman, going out there being a fuckface. So it's like, it made me realize that these moral principles that I had never had were actually there to protect me from myself, not be some unfair judge from Sky Daddy that is going to send me to hell if I don't do what he wants me to do. I'm going to go to hell if I can't control myself, if I have to be a slave to my subconscious programming and these like base root desires, like the hippies, they talk about your root chakra and how that's where like your animalistic lizard brain lives. And if you don't have principles, then that is what dictates your being. And I mean, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't at some point in life get in touch with that side of yourself, but to allow that side of yourself to run your life. I mean, the way that I think about it is you have the seven deadly sins and the seven heavenly virtues. And the seven deadly sins are like, I can never remember all seven of them. It's like greed, lust, envy, sloth, avarice. And there's two more. Oh man. And it's funny, there's this anime called The Seven Deadly Sins, and in the Seven Deadly Sins, the heroes are actually named after the seven deadly sins, and the anti-heroes are named after the Ten Commandments. And or actually the heroes aren't named after the seven deadly sins. That's just like what their group is called, and there's seven of them. But then there's the Ten Commandments. And anyways, but the thing is just the way that this anime anthropomorphized these ideas, it made me think of a more metaphorical aspect of possession. And that would be that you have all these negative emotions, and if you were to imagine like these emotions inside you just taking control through, again, those positive feedback loops. It's like you feel jealous that someone has something that you don't, and then you start feeling greedy because you want it, and then you start feeling scared because you think you'll never have it, and then you start feeling angry because you think it should be yours to take. And all of a sudden the narrative in your head is telling you, fuck all these people, they don't deserve that shit. What did they ever do to deserve it? You're the one that should be able to take it. And now all of a sudden you're coming up with ways to to go rob someone. And the same thing happens, with drugs. It's like, you have some emotional issue, whatever it is. Your mom yelled at you, won't let you go do something. Your wife left you, or your wife yelled at you, won't let you go do something. So it triggers this conversation in your head, which then makes you feel all these other emotions, which then eventually makes you act. And then a lot of times those actions reinforce the negativity. So it's like then you go do the drug, right? And then and you feel super high for a minute, but then as you're coming down, everything comes back way worse. And it's all of a sudden it's the negative emotions except amplified. It's the negative language except amplified. And then all the way back to another action except amplified. And so we get caught in these feedback loops, and it's really hard to get out of them. And that's where, these principles can come in, is like if you're able to look at your actions or your thoughts and compare them against your principle, I'm not going to say that you necessarily get a correct answer and you know exactly what to do, but you can kind of know like at least what not to do. And, you can catch yourself when you're being really negative, and it's like, even if you, based on your emotions, you feel that it's justified, you can still be like, bro, you're really being a little bit much here. Like, do you really need to be saying fuck this and fuck that, and having a temper tantrum in your brain, and to the point where now you just have no other option but to cheat on your wife and get so fucked up that you wind up getting a DUI on your way home. Like, that's how possession happens. Like, you are no longer in control because you didn't think from a place of your principles. You didn't think from your first principle through a chain of logic to a rational outcome or response. You just thought emotionally. You allowed a negative thing that happened to you to transform into a fuck this, fuck that, fuck everyone, which transformed into a justified action, justified on your part, um, which then started the cycle all over again. And it's like, that's no way to live. So, and you're not going to get sober doing that either. It's like, I think that's why so many people relapse, is because they think sobriety is just about counting days. And it's like, unless you actually address what the fuck is going on, like, that's why I spent so much time setting all of that up, is because I had to explain sort of to you like how I got there and what I was thinking. How did I get to first principles, and like why do I think they're so important? Because to this day, that still is my answer for sobriety, and why I think so many people fail at getting sober is that they don't understand principles. They don't have self-respect and integrity. It's like, you can't have self-respect and integrity unless you have principles, because you can't set boundaries without principles. And you can't have self-respect or integrity unless you're following your boundaries. And that's the thing is, I don't know, it's hard to understand, because we think by not having boundaries, we're doing whatever we want. That is somehow the thing that is honoring our truest being or something. But in reality, like, just unbridled existence, I don't know. But in reality, it's like the thing that allows you to grow into the most beautiful, truest aspect of yourself. And what I mean by that is like the most aligned. Like, everyone has this conversation going in their head, and it's like the further away you get from that in reality, the more disheveled you are, and the closer you get to that, the more like unified you are. And that's why I don't blame trans people and stuff for being so bad out of shape. It's like, if you're that, if the thoughts in your head are that far from the reality you see in the mirror, that's fucking hard stuff to deal with. And if you watch my testimony, I've been through some of that myself. Not necessarily thinking I was a girl, but body dysmorphia and wanting to be different, and a lot of the stuff that played into my insecurity. And so, yeah, it was a long roundabout way to get there, but the thing I would say about sobriety that's been the most important for me is not being sober, but it is that process. Like, I feel like I could probably do a lot of different things that a lot of people would say, oh, I have to start counting again. Like, my sobriety's been ruined, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think like that really. I'm definitely not going to drink any alcohol. But there's a lot of other things that I wouldn't care about, not worried about either. Weed is not one of them, though, because I continued to smoke weed throughout my sobriety, and I'm actually to a point with weed where I'm happy to have had it, because I abused prescription drugs, benzodiazepines and whatever else, lots of opiates and things. And so I'm kind of just against taking pills, especially because of a lot that I've learned about the pharmaceutical industry. So I don't really, and I believe in much more of a holistic approach. Like, my whole thing is like, if you change your internal narrative, like if you actually change your heart and your mind, and you actually give your body what it needs, water, sleep, nutrition, what's possible. And so I actually view using a lot of outside stuff that currently gets used, like pharmaceuticals, as sort of a hack, and religion in large part too. Although I do believe that people should try to be like Jesus Christ. I think a lot of times in doing so, people get too caught up on the whole, if you believe with your heart, if you believe with your heart that Jesus is Lord, and confess with your mouth that God raised him from the dead, you are saved. I think people get caught up on that too much, and they forget about the whole um, go and see my Father. Jesus was constantly saying, I can't do anything for you myself. Go and see my Father. Go and see my Father. And that's why Christians get caught up on it, is because they believe that Jesus is God. And they believe that praying to Jesus is the same thing as praying to Father God. And I personally don't believe that. I believe Jesus might have been perfect and he might have been God's son, but I believe we're all God's children. We were all made in his image. And that when Jesus said, go and see my Father, he was saying, go and see your Father. And the only way to do that is in meditation and self-reflection. And, that's not something that people focus on a lot, I guess. They want to just focus on the I'm saved because I said the right words part. And so, I don't know, I think that becomes a stumbling block in recovery, because religion could, if you were actually doing the work that religion asks you to do, then it would force you to actually think about how you got to where you got, why you got there, and what you need to do to be different. But as it stands, people can very easily just rationalize everything, get their 30 days sober at a detox, eating snacks and drinking juice boxes and doing worksheets, and then just leave and think that, I did the thing, so now I'm supposed to be on the right path. And then they relapse and they wind up there again, and it just becomes confusing, and nothing works. And a lot of those people are the ones that do wind up homeless, and so that really is the crux of my sobriety checkup here, is how then can you inspire people? If you've been paying attention to what I've been saying, then there's no real answer here that involves giving anyone anything. You can't give people money. You can't force people to believe things. But the answer is in what they believe. And so the question is, how do you inspire people who have been taught that the world is out to get them, and that everything is unfair, and that they have no chance to try? You're going to say, oh, you're going to have to move to a state that you've never been, to take a job that you're unfamiliar with people that you don't know. But if you do that, you'll start making enough money to afford, a small place, like a studio or whatever. And this whole time, you need to be watching out. No, you can't be having casual sex. You can't be doing drugs. You need to be putting yourself together so that way you can actually have a wife and a family. And why do I say that? It's because there's no hope for our future if we're the type of people that will just let our brothers and sisters and cousins and moms and dads and sons and daughters waste away on the street without a family. It's like, whether or not you can have your own family or you can go become part of a family, it's like that is what people need to learn. And you can't, how do you make someone feel love? How do you make someone want to be part of a family again after they've been betrayed for their whole life? How do you make people want to work hard? How do you make people see that they could transform themselves from being these like rotten trees that bear no fruit to these like beautiful trees that have the sweetest fruits? It's like, if only they knew how the toxic narrative in their head was causing them to fail and to be stuck in negative emotion and to constantly need to self-medicate and escape. And it's rough, I suppose, because I don't really see an answer, especially with the way that the current situation is with church. It's like church is just a joke to most people. And I think a large part of that is because, most people that look at church, they don't see people being scientific in their approach to repentance. You know, they don't see people doing the work and having results. They see this sort of smorgasbord of people that are like overzealous and like just seem possessed in their own right, except maybe this time with positive toxicity. Like they're just way too happy and we're just giving it to God, like bless, 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 fucking bless. And like meanwhile they can't even have a fucking conversation about the fact that they like are neurotic and completely obsessed with who knows what bullshit. Anyways, yeah, I think that's really it for me today. I wanted to just check in and talk about where I'm at now that I'm at 5 years. I'm gonna be trying to relaunch this channel here, and I want to make content that is kind of just like this. I mean, I don't know. A lot of stuff seems so fake to me, and I'm just trying to talk to people, be down to earth, and have real conversations here about what I've been through and what worked for me, and trying to inspire other people to make changes themselves, because it's really easy to go through life without actually thinking. And the funny thing is, the only thing that you're actually thinking, the only real thought that you have is the thought that you're thinking. And you're tricking yourself into thinking that you're thinking because there's words going through your head and there's ideas happening and there's actions taking place. But again, when you don't realize that you're completely possessed by jealousy and fear and anger and lust and all these other root emotions that give you instant gratification, it feels so good to be able to get catharsis from them. And so you believe that you're thinking this whole time because you're choosing to do things and they're things that you like. So you must have been the one that put that all together, right? I don't know. In my experience, that's not necessarily true. Not saying that there's an actual demon inside my head, but whoever that guy was certainly not aligned with my best interests. We'll just say that. So anyways, yeah, I hope this message finds you well. I hope you'll leave a comment or follow me if you'd like to see more of this. I'm definitely going to have more structured videos in the future, since this is my first video back and I really just wanted to make some content today. I figured I'll just go off the top and do a checkup, where I just sort of go over everything that I've been thinking about recently. And I'm a Lyft driver at the moment, and so I'm constantly seeing the homeless people in downtown San Diego, and I'm thinking about my journey with sobriety. And I'm just watching these people, and I see myself right there. I'm like, dude, all it would have taken is like just a few more months of drinking booze and taking acid and doing blow, like, and it would have made perfect sense, right? Everything would have made perfect sense because there's all the political turmoil, and I could have just blamed everything. Like I would have been right there with them. Burning all my bridges to the point where I had nowhere else to go, but still just wanted to get high. At what point do you walk under the bridge? Fucking Jesus. Anyways, good luck with your sobriety. Do something nice for yourself today. Do one hard thing and do it easily. All right. Cheers, everyone.